I've been thinking, who is the most underrated, slept-on team of the offseason? And when I thought about it, the team that I ultimately settled on was the criminally underrated Arizona Cardinals. That's right. You probably didn't expect me to say the Arizona Cardinals are the most underrated team, the most slept on offseason of 2025 entering the 2025 NFL Draft. But that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in this video. I think the Cardinals are being slept on. I think that Arizona is underrated. Before I break down why I believe the Cardinals are criminally slept on, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for NFL coverage on all 32 teams, including the Arizona Cardinals. Now, when it comes to having an underrated offseason, I think in free agency, the goal should be entering the draft without any noticeable glaring needs. And when I was scanning for a team that I could discuss as a sleeper for 2025, one team stood out, and that team was the Cardinals. And I asked myself, what does this team actually need? This team could play tomorrow, and they would be better than they were last year. And last season, the Arizona Cardinals were not a bad football team. The Arizona Cardinals were 8-9. The Arizona Cardinals were 12th offensively in points for, 15th in points against. They were 11th in yardage, 10th in offensive EPA. And as you can see by the statistics, there was one glaring area of need. Defense. Their defense was 24th in EPA, 21st in yards allowed. And believe it or not, this football team was a top 13 team in terms of SRS rating, Pro Football References simple rating system, which basically calculates the point differential of NFL teams combined with the strength of schedule and the scoring margin. They were an above average NFL team last year. Yeah, they finished 8-9 and they didn't make the playoffs. And ultimately, they were forgotten after a very good start to the season last year. The Cardinals fell apart down the stretch and were ultimately forgotten. But I think the Cardinals have made some necessary improvements to make them maybe a playoff type of team this year and potentially a sleeper for 2025. I've been begging the Arizona Cardinals ever since Jonathan Gannon took over as head coach to get him some help in the front seven. And finally, the Arizona Cardinals have done just that. And it began with an old friend of Jonathan Gannon. His name is Josh Sweat. Sweat is a really good edge rusher. He dominated the Super Bowl. He has had multiple successful 8+ sack seasons in the NFL. He has played standing up on the edge, hand in the dirt. He's an equally distributive, great run defender and edge setter with his length and power, but also quick and bendy enough to be a very effective pass rusher. This guy had his best season of his career under Jonathan Gannon in 2022. They reunite in Arizona, and that instantly gives the Cardinals a credible pass rusher on the edge, something that they have not had since Gannon has been their guy. And really, They have not had that since maybe Chandler Jones lost his marbles. Like, that's the last time they had a really good pass rusher that could sack the quarterback. Because if you're thinking about what needed to improve for Arizona, like I said, it was defense. You look at this defense last year, it was atrocious. Really, across the board, they were not very good in many statistics. 31st in points per drive allowed. 28th in yards per drive allowed. 32nd in plays per drive allowed, and 31st in time of possession allowed. They were 24th in first downs. They weren't bad from a pass yards or rush yard standpoint, but every meaningful statistic per drive, they were poor, right? Their offense really made them look better than they were and put them in advantageous position. 28th on third down is also horrific. Many of these statistics would be solved with a pass rush. Many of these statistics would be solved with a stronger front seven. And that's why I felt the Cardinals were never going to be a playoff team last year. I didn't predict them to go to the playoffs. Honestly, they performed better than I would have thought last year. Because you look at that front seven on paper last season, and it was pathetic. It was thin. It was not very electric. It didn't have many difference makers. And now they've added a couple. The first being Josh Sweat. I mean, this team had nobody on their roster with over 5 sacks. 5 sacks. No one, not a single person on their entire team last year had 5+ sacks. And I understand that their best pass rusher, I guess you would call him, Dennis Gardeck, got injured, but still, I mean, that is pathetic. They were 25th in rush defense yards per attempt. So they were not good at getting to the quarterback. They were not good at stopping the run. They were good at neither thing. They just couldn't do anything well, right? They couldn't put themselves in a run defense situation where they were forcing negatives, where they were stopping the run, where they were allowing their pass rush, their creative blitzing schemes, which they do have. I've seen it. They didn't allow themselves to be put in an advantageous position. So yeah, you can have Josh Sweat. You can have a guy to get to the quarterback. But what about, the guys to stop the run, right? So the Cardinals also needed to solidify that. Not only did they bring back an old friend of Jonathan Gannon, they brought back a familiar face of the Arizona Cardinals. Recently signed Calais Campbell, who you might know this, maybe. Not only is he one of the best run defenders in the NFL, remember how I mentioned run defense being the key to getting to the quarterback because you need to be in situations to get to the quarterback. Calais Campbell was the number one, first at 1,000 years old, number one graded run defender in the NFL at defensive tackle. Number one. So that helps your run defense. Whether he declines slightly or not, it's going to help your run defense drastically. His length, his size, his power to play inside and even across the defensive line. You can use Calais Campbell in a variety of ways. He's a very versatile player, as Cardinals fans do know. I mean, he was probably one of the more underrated players when he was in Arizona before he signed in Jacksonville and really took off from a public appreciation standpoint. He was very underrated for the Cardinals back in the day. But not only did they sign Calais Campbell, they also signed a big nose tackle, which they really didn't have on the team last year. Dalvin Tomlinson, who's been one of the best run defenders in football for the past 7 years, is now on this team as a nose tackle. And he's not much of a pass rusher. He can push the pocket, but he is not a sack guy, right? He's going to help everyone around him improve in terms of pass rush productivity because he's going to space eat. He's going to take on double teams, and he's going to eat the run to help those players get in situations where they can rush the quarterback. He's been in Cleveland to help Myles Garrett the last couple of years, and 2 years ago, they had one of the best defenses of the last 10 years. Dalvin Tomlinson's been very good everywhere he's been in his career. Cleveland, Minnesota, New York, right? He's been multiple places. Last year, he was 32nd, according to PFF, their grading. He was 29th in run defense grade. That's drastically better than anybody they had at defensive tackle. 6'3", 325 pounds. And I bring up his size because the Cardinals did not have really anyone above 300 pounds playing defensive tackle last year. It was kind of embarrassing. Like Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones, who they signed to substantial contracts a couple years ago, only played 100 or so snaps. That's not really helping you, and that's not really providing that beef on the field. I mean, the guys that they were putting in the rotation on the inside, LJ Collier is kind of an edge inside hybrid player. Like, he was drafted by Seattle to be the Michael Bennett 2.0, but he never became that. But he's not a bad rotation player, right? He kind of took on the role that was supposed to be for their first round pick, Darius Robinson. Dante Stills is a good pass rusher, 4.5 sacks, 68th PFF grade last year, but both are under 300 pounds. Like, Stills is out there to get to the quarterback in a sub-rush situation. So him and Campbell can contribute on those third downs as rushers, I would believe. You can even move around Darius Robinson to that position where he's effective as well. And now Calais Campbell with the length especially, and then Dalvin Tomlinson with the size, those guys are going to eat the space on the inside to make your entire run defense better. Plus, you got Josh Sweat setting the edge on one side, and Robinson, who you drafted in the first round last year, who only played about 6 games, 184 snaps. He was built to play strong side edge in the NFL. Like, he's a guy that has that inside-outside versatility. He's a little too big to play defensive end, but he's a little too small to play defensive tackle, right? So you could have him as like a 5 tech and a 3-4, but you can also move him out wide, and he'll overpower tackles because he's got the length and the power advantage. So now on a traditional first and second down, you'll have Robinson and Sweat setting the edge with their length and power, and you'll have Campbell and Tomlinson on the inside. And then you can switch up your sub-rush package to include Baron Browning. Baron Browning only played 8 games for the Cardinals last year. Notice a trend here. So these are a lot of new players for 2025 for the Cardinals, which means I can see them getting a lot better. They were 8-9 last year. This is why they're being slept on. Okay, Sweat is brand new. Campbell's brand new. Sweat, best player in the Super Bowl. Campbell, number 1 run defender. Dalvin Tomlinson, like legacy run defender at this point. That's 3 improved players. Browning for an entire season, who is a very good pure finesse edge pass rusher with bend and the moves. He's a little undersized. That's why you kind of want him to be more of a sub-package rusher, right? But they re-signed him to play on third down, to get to the quarterback in passing situations. So occasionally second, right? But most often, I wouldn't include him in first down unless they're including him as some sort of linebacker type role, because he can play a linebacker or edge. So the versatility also exists there in traditional, base sets. If they want him to play like 3-4 outside linebacker, he can probably do that pretty effectively. Now, what happens with all these additions, right? That's basically 4. Your entire starting defensive line is new, essentially. Right? Browning only played half the year. So now, okay, Zaven Collins, who's a former linebacker, edge rusher, 5 sacks last year, was the guy with 5 sacks. He's a rotation player. He's a linebacker / defensive end. So you can pick and choose your spots for his specialties, right? Ojulari didn't play last year. He's got talent. He's a depth player now. You don't have to count on him. Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols, if you want to keep them, they're depth players. That's much more of what they are and always have been instead of what they were signed to be, right? Which was starters, which was my concern. They were overpaid initially, in my opinion. Dante Stills is more of just a third down player. LJ Collier is a backup. So now you're talking about the depth. These players that were playing 500 snaps for you are now playing depth roles, which makes your front seven and your defense so much better. So just by that alone, the ability to stop the run with additions like Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson, the ability to get to the quarterback because of Josh Sweat, because Robinson will be out there more, because Browning will be out there more, that's going to make your defense so much better and your team so much better. Now, the positions that they didn't address, safety, Budda Baker, and Thompson, one of the best combinations in football. Thompson ranked 32nd, Baker ranked 12th. Both are phenomenal. Baker is the leader, the heart and soul of the defense, and arguably the team. Taylor Demerson is very underrated as their third safety, playing 258 snaps last year and having a very good coverage grade and run defense grade, a 75.5 PFF grade, which is very, very solid. For a third safety, he's talented. He was a 4th-round pick last year, I think, and does showcase some upside. You do need 3 good safeties in the NFL, in my opinion. At corner, this is where they might want to address this position. Garrett Williams is an excellent nickel corner. He graded as the 3rd best corner in football last year and was actually like a sneaky player that is getting a lot of recognition, like one of the more underrated players in the NFL last year. Their perimeter corner position is the problem, though, because they actually improved at safety and improved, with their ability and coverage at safety. But at outside corner, they were the worst team in football last season at covering opponents. The lowest graded team in football at perimeter corner. So Max Melton, I liked coming out of the draft. He was a 2nd-round pick. Can he improve in year 2? Right? Gannon, former defensive back coach, can he continue to tutor and teach him and get him to improve? I think Sean Murphy-Bunting is what he is at this point. I've seen enough of him. I used to follow the Bucs religiously when he was on the team, and he kind of just is what he is. He's more of like a 3rd hybrid outside slot corner. Like, he's not exactly a pure starter, in my opinion. Starling Thomas, he's more of a depth player. Elijah Jones, I really liked. He was injured last year. We'll see if he can make an impact in his 2nd season. Now, I will say, can they add a corner to this mix in the draft? 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, can they just add another competition piece to this secondary? Because they maybe are missing, they probably need Sean Murphy-Bunting to start right now, and they need Max Melton to develop. But could Elijah Jones maybe replace Sean Murphy-Bunting potentially? That would go a long way, I think. Defensively, linebacker is also a pretty big weakness for them. I like Mack Wilson, but I don't think he's a team's top linebacker. Like, he was on the Patriots 2 years ago. I loved his hybrid nature. Fast, quick, vicious. He can blitz really well. Pass rush, he's kind of sneaky effective. And he is pretty rangy in coverage because he's got very good speed. I think Mack Wilson is underrated. They also signed Akeem Davis-Gaither to replace Kaiser White, who Gaither did grade better than White last year, 58th. Gaither has never been a starting linebacker, though, religiously, outside of, last year when Logan Wilson got hurt. So I don't know if he's really a traditional starter. So they do need to look at defense. Like, if Jahad Campbell were there in the 1st round, I would very much consider him. But Gannon, being that he's from Philly, they have never really spent a lot of money on that position. So I don't typically think that they're going to go out of their way there. And Mykal Walker, they also signed, who's played starting snaps in his past for the Falcons. So there's depth there, but I don't necessarily feel like they've got a big-time piece. Maybe they'll go with the depth piece in the draft. But the linebacker position, if the linebacker and you're kind of banking on some younger corners to develop, if that's the worst of your problems now on defense compared to last year, where we were talking about how's this team going to have size, how's this team going to stop the run, who's going to get sacks, who's going to get pressure? Like, on 3rd down, who am I counting on? Like, that's no longer a question. And therefore, with the improved pass rush, you could have a better secondary because you're going to have more pressure. And you could also maybe play to their strengths in coverage a little bit more because you'll have better front 7. You'll have better run defense, at least in theory, right? So that, to me, is why I think the Cardinals are super underrated. And that's before even getting to the offense. So the offense in general last year was underrated. And they haven't really done anything to improve. But I don't think people truly recognize how good this offense was last year. Like, last season, they were pretty much top 10 in every single stat. Like, they were 9th in point. At least that matters to me. They were 9th in points per drive. They were 6th in yards per drive. They were 4th in plays per drive. So they possessed the ball. They moved the ball. And they scored points. 18th in the pass game, which was a little underwhelming for Kyler Murray. And I think there was a specific reason, and we'll get into that. 7th in rushing, though. They were not only improved in rushing, but one of the most dynamic rushing teams in football. Partly because of Kyler, partly because of James Conner, but also the scheme is very, very effective. 1st downs, 9th, and 3rd down, 8th. So they were able to move the ball, score points, possess the ball, convert 3rd downs, And for the most part, keep the chains moving and keep their defense off the field, which was their main priority. They also had pretty good balance as an offense as well. So when you look at this offense, they were second in yards per attempt rushing the ball. Like, this offense at its core is built off of James Conner running the ball. It's built off of his 15 plus 100-yard season last year, 9 touchdowns, 47 catches. They love to screen the ball to him. They love to run the ball with James Conner, and they love to have their pulling linemen. They love to get out in space and hit explosive runs. And Kyler Murray, off of that, can keep the ball, which creates another dimension of danger for a defense, okay? On top of the running game, they've got a guy named Trey McBride, who they just extended. He caught 111 receptions last year. He's a top 3 tight end in the NFL. I don't think without debate, if you're putting Brock Bowers and George Kittle in the same conversation. I think Trey McBride is right there, especially as a receiver. Elijah Higgins behind him, Higgins behind him is also pretty talented. He was drafted last year, 20 catches as well for them. And then their running backs behind James Conner. Benson can hit the home run. I'm excited to see him in year 2. DeMarcado, I think, is one of the better third-string running backs in football. He's always impressed me every time I've turned on the tape. But I think the biggest reason they weren't an elite offense last year and just a good offense, right? They were top 10. They were very good, but they weren't great, was because I think Marvin Harrison Jr. was expected to do more. He needs to have a breakout season, and he needs to become a stud for this team to surge. Like, that's what needs to happen. Last year, 62 catches, 885 yards, 8 touchdowns. You know, he was 27th ranked by PFF. That's good, but for a guy that was lauded as potentially generational, best receiver, you know, since Jamar Chase or whatever, that's a little disappointing, especially when guys like Brian Thomas are going off and Malik Neighbors behind him are going off. And it appears that he's at best the 3rd best receiver in this draft class. Ladd McConkey, I thought, had a better season. So Marvin Harrison, Kyler Murray, they got to get dialed in, and the offense needs to figure out a way to get the ball to Marvin Harrison instead of just lining him up outside and just letting him run routes all day long and just run straight. So they got to figure that out as well. But the other question I have from a draft standpoint, so we've talked about, okay, they might need a corner, they might need a linebacker. Those are positions they'll look at in the draft. From a receiver standpoint, do they need a number 2 receiver? I think what they're looking at is our defense has improved, our tight end is elite, we have a very good young receiver in Marvin Harrison. Those are our 2 main pass catchers, so we're not going to overspend at wide receiver 2. Michael Wilson, 47 catches, 548 yards. It's nothing special, but he's a solid player. Greg Dortch, I love his shiftiness and his craftiness as a route runner in the slot. 37 catches last year. And Zay Jones is their number 4. He barely played last year, but he's a capable number 4. I think if they're missing anything, it's a speed threat. They're missing legitimate home run speed, which could lessen the load and could kind of help Marvin Harrison because safeties might have to be backing up because of a speed threat on the opposite side. So that'd be something I'd think about because Michael Wilson's not very fast, but neither of their top 2 receivers, Dortch or Wilson, graded as a top 64 player outside of Marvin Harrison. So they could use a number 2 receiver, but with the improvements on defense, I think they're probably going to try to improve the interior offensive line. You look at tackle where they're actually pretty good. Like Paris Johnson was the 12th best tackle last year, according to PFF. Jonah Williams was 37th despite getting injured. That's above, so you have 32 tackles starting at each position. He's like almost a number 1 tackle, essentially. Calvin Beachum is a very good swing tackle. He graded 51st. They just re-signed him today, I think. Christian Jones, also, I loved coming out of the draft. He had a 77 pass block grade as a rookie, which is very good. So he is the 4th tackle. So they've got a very deep and very capable tackle position. Their interior O-line, though, might be the weakest area on their team. It's debatable. I think they could add a guard to replace Isaiah Adams at right guard. He was 52nd. But Froholt is one of the better movement centers in football. His ability to move and get in space. He was 6th in the league. And Evan Brown's a hybrid center guard, which gives you versatility. He was 30th. I would like to see them address guard. I don't think they need to do it in the first round. I'd prefer if they address defense in the first round, whatever that may be. If they feel like that should be a future interior defensive lineman, I would rather them go with like a corner or a defensive back. But I mean, if they want to go, or a linebacker like Campbell, like I said, I would rather those positions because those are legitimate positions of weakness. While you do have Tomlinson and Campbell for at least the short term in defensive line. But if you wanted to pick like a Harmon or something, I wouldn't be outraged by that whatsoever. If you did want to go with a guard, I could also understand that, but I do think you could get some guys in the second or third round for sure. So I think the only pick they don't have is a 6th or something like that. So they're only missing one of their picks. But interesting, though, to note is Cologne and Hernandez are both free agents, so they could also like re-sign Will Hernandez, and that would already be an upgrade over Isaiah Adams, in my opinion. So that's something they could do as well, because I don't think he's been signed yet. So the offensive line could use a little bit of improvement, but ultimately it will come down to, because I think this team right now is a fringe playoff team. I think they've improved. They were 8-9 last year, and they've improved. Their defense, there's no doubt it's improved. Plus, they got an entire draft class to add to this team, whether it be a corner, a linebacker, a guard, a wide receiver. We went through the positions, right? The Kyler question is the ultimate question, right? He's had 25 games since the ACL. Can he get back to his peak performances of earlier in his career, where he's the road runner, he's the creator, he's the most unique playmaker at this position in football, or at least in that debate, and he makes everybody better. I felt like in the first 8 weeks of last year, he was a top 10 quarterback, but it fell off humongously, right? It was bad. They brought in Jacoby Brissett to hopefully help him with some study habits and to just give him a good quality backup, veteran, reliable personality. Like, he was in New England last year. He helped Drake May a lot, even Joe Milton a lot, ended up getting him traded. So I feel like Jacoby's really going to help, and he's also been good with Petzing as well in the Cleveland Brown system. So even if Kyler does get hurt, I think Jacoby can get in there and play a couple of games. Again, they were 6-4 before the bye. They were 2-5 after the bye. The only wins they had were against a CFL team, the New England Patriots, my Patriots, and the 49ers without Brock Purdy, I think, right? So that's, yeah, I think, what's his name? Dobbs played. So yeah, I mean, it was not a good ending to the season. It was a collapse, an absolute, utter collapse. But I'm here to tell you, Cardinals fans, that with this year's schedule, where they play the AFC South and the NFC South, right, it's easy. And they have improved. And they know it. And you know it. And I'm here to tell you, stop sleeping on the Cardinals. Because I think they're criminally underrated. I'm excited to see what they do in the draft, because they might be a sleeper pick for a wild card spot in 2025. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's Mitch. Spike the like button if you enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe. I'd really appreciate the love. Comment your opinion. Peace.